What if a painting could make you forget who a man really was? What if an artist could take a controversial politician, a man associated with fear, violence, and executions, and transform him into something almost sacred? That is exactly what happened with one of the most powerful paintings of the French Revolution. Look closely. A man lies peacefully in a bathtub. His head is wrapped in white cloth, one arm hangs over the edge. A pen remains in his hand. His face looks calm, almost gentle. There is no sense of panic, no screaming, no struggle. Instead, the scene feels strangely peaceful, almost religious. But this man was not a saint. He was Jean-Paul Marat. And the painting is the Death of Marat asterisk, created by the French artist Jacques-Louis David. At first, it appears to show us exactly what happened. But David was doing something far more complicated. He was not simply painting a dead man. He was creating a version of that man that people would remember. And once you understand the details, you begin to realize that this painting may be one of history's most successful examples of turning political reality into emotional propaganda. To understand why, we need to go back to the real Marat. Jean-Paul Marat was one of the most radical voices of the French Revolution. Through his newspaper, The Friend of the People, he attacked political enemies and encouraged the revolutionary movement to become more aggressive. To his supporters, Marat was a defender of ordinary French citizens. But to his enemies, he was dangerous. His political writings could contribute to an atmosphere of fear, suspicion, and violence. There was also another side to his life. Marat suffered from a painful skin disease that caused severe irritation and sores. Bathing offered him some relief, so he began spending long periods in his bathtub. But this was not simply where he rested. It became his office. He wrote there. He worked there. He received visitors there. A wooden board placed across the bathtub could function as his desk. And this is where his story finally ended. On July 13, 1793, a young woman named Charlotte Corday arrived at Marat's home. Corday supported the more moderate Girondin faction and had become convinced that Marat was helping push France toward greater violence. She believed removing him could help stop the bloodshed. At first, she was refused entry. But she eventually gained access by claiming to have information about political enemies. Marat was in his bath. Corday approached him with a list of names. He began discussing what should happen to the people on that list. Then suddenly, Corday pulled out a knife. She struck Marat once. The wound was fatal. The assassination was over within moments. But something much bigger was about to begin. Because Marat's death gave Jacques-Louis David an opportunity. David was not a distant observer. He was politically connected to Marat and deeply involved in the revolutionary movement. He visited the scene after the assassination. He saw the reality of Marat's death. But when he painted it, he did not reproduce that reality exactly. He transformed it. Look at Marat's skin. It is smooth, clean, almost flawless. The painful disease that had affected his real body has disappeared. David gives us a healthier, younger, more beautiful Marat. Then look at the room. The real environment would have contained ordinary objects and signs of daily life. But David removes almost everything. The background fades into darkness. There is no clutter, no distractions, only Marat. And in the foreground is a simple wooden box with writing materials resting on top. It looks humble, almost like a monument. The message is clear. This was not a man living for luxury. This was a man devoted to his cause. But the most important details are the papers. One document is connected to Charlotte Corday. Another suggests Marat was helping a poor woman and her children. Suddenly, the viewer is no longer thinking about Marat's political violence. Instead, we are shown a compassionate man performing an act of kindness shortly before his death. That is the genius of the composition. David does not need to tell the audience that Marat was innocent. He simply removes the evidence that might make them question him. Then comes the most powerful transformation of all. Look at Marat's arm. It hangs over the side of the bathtub, completely lifeless, while his hand still holds the pen. The pose resembles the bodies of Christ in religious paintings. The white cloth resembles a burial shroud. The bathtub begins to resemble a tomb. The wound becomes symbolic, and the pen becomes a symbol of his cause. David was borrowing the visual language of religious martyrdom. He was taking a political assassination and giving it the appearance of a sacred sacrifice. Marat was no longer simply a revolutionary who had been murdered. He had become a martyr. And this image arrived at exactly the right moment for the revolutionary government. France was experiencing enormous political and social upheaval. Traditional religious institutions were being challenged, but people still needed symbols of devotion. David gave them one. Instead of a crucified religious figure, they were given a revolutionary hero. The painting spread. People gathered around it. Many were deeply moved by what they saw. They were not simply looking at a corpse. They were looking at an innocent man who seemed to have died while serving the people. And that image helped strengthen Marat's reputation after death. But there was an irony hidden inside the story. Charlotte Corday had believed that killing Marat might help end the violence. Instead, his death became another reason for violence. His assassination was treated as evidence of conspiracy. Fear increased. Political enemies were targeted. And the revolution moved even deeper into terror. For a brief period, Marat was elevated almost like a secular saint. But political power never stays still. Eventually, the Jacobin regime collapsed. And when the political climate changed, Marat's reputation collapsed with it. The same man who had once been celebrated as a hero was now remembered by many as a dangerous extremist. His remains were removed from the pantheon. The revolutionary cult surrounding him disappeared. And David himself eventually fell from political favor and went into exile. His painting also became politically dangerous. It was returned to him and remained away from public view for years. And that is perhaps the strangest part of the entire story. The painting itself never changed. The canvas remained exactly the same. Marat's face was still peaceful. His arm still hung over the bathtub. The pen was still in his hand. But the meaning of the painting changed completely. Why? Because the people looking at it had changed. And that is the real power of asterisk, the death of Marat asterisk. The painting reminds us that history is not remembered only through facts. It is also remembered through images. David understood that. He knew that people might forget political speeches. They might forget newspaper articles. They might even forget the details of an assassination. but they would remember an image. A dead man in a bathtub, a peaceful face, a white cloth, a pen in his hand, a body arranged like a martyr. That image could survive long after the political movement that created it had disappeared. And today, when we look at the Death of Marat asterisk, we can see both versions of the story. We can see the beautiful painting, but we can also see the manipulation behind it. The real Marat was complicated. He was sick. He was political. He was admired by some and feared by others. Charlotte Corday was not simply a monster either. She believed she was acting to save France. And David was not merely recording history. He was shaping it. That is why this painting remains so powerful after more than 2 centuries. It teaches us that an image does not have to show a lie to change the truth. Sometimes all an artist has to do is decide what to leave out. Because when you control the image, you can influence the memory. And when you control the memory, you can change the way an entire generation understands the past. Marat died only once, but through David's painting, he was given another life. Not necessarily as the man he truly was, but as the man the revolution wanted people to remember. And perhaps that is the darkest secret hidden inside the Death of Marat asterisk. The painting did not simply capture history. It helped create the history people remembered.